And so the Sock Monkey project begins. Please remember, as you're sewing your fantastic new furry friends, that it's okay to take breaks. You don't have to do this in one sitting. Take your time and have fun with it. Here we have all of our supplies that we're going to be using to make our sock monkey. So there's stuffing, we've got a pair of socks, some thread, as well as buttons for the eyes of our sock monkey. We have a needle to do our sewing with, and a marker to draw our lines for our pattern, and then some scissors. So the first stage of making our sock monkey is making the legs and the body. So that's what we're doing here. We're lying our sock out flat, making sure that the heel is pointed towards the sky. And the material that is on the inside of the sock now will be on the outside of the sock monkey later, so make sure you have it positioned correctly. After we have our sock laid out flat, we're going to go ahead and draw the pattern on the sock. So these lines of the pattern are going to be the lines that we're sewing on. This pattern is made up of 2 parallel lines running from the heel of the sock to the ankle of the sock. At the end of these parallel lines are scoops or bends that connect to the outside of the body of the sock. These scoops will become your sock monkey's feet. Here I'm cutting a piece of string that is same as my wingspan, just by stretching out my arms. And let's get to threading this needle. It's time to sew. This is tricky. It takes a little time, and that is okay. It always takes me a couple tries too. Just have patience and you'll get it. Make sure that your string isn't frayed at the end, and maybe even wet it with a little spit to pull it to a point. It's a good trick. After you have your thread through your needle, pull it so both ends are together, and then you can tie them in a knot. Because this is a stretchy material that we're sewing with, it's important that we make our knot at the end of our string quite large, so it's not going to pull through if any tension's put on the thread or if the material is stretched. Now that we have our needle threaded on this scrap piece of fabric, I'm going to show you guys how to do a back stitch, which is the stitch we're going to be using to make our body. I am pushing the needle through the back of the fabric to the front, making sure that it's on this line, and you guys can see the knot in the back there. After that, I'm going to take the needle and push it back through to the back of the fabric, about a centimeter down. The spacing, the closer they are, the tighter the stitch is going to be, also the longer it's going to take. So that's up to you guys. After I have that string pulled all the way through the other side, you can see it poke back out. I'm going to take my needle, push it towards the front of the fabric again, so it's topping out the front, and I want it to come out in between my first 2 stitches. It doesn't have to go in between your first 2 threads. That is something that you can do if you prefer. It's up to you. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, so it really doesn't matter, but it does help keep your line a little bit more straight. And you're just going to continue this all the way down. So that's 1 complete back stitch. Then you're going to go down again. They'll come back through from underneath halfway up, and then go back down again. So you can understand why it's called a back stitch, because you're retracing your steps a little bit. I'll do a couple more for the demo, and this is the stitch you're going to be using to make all of your body parts. Anything that's being cut directly out of the template, you're using this stitch on. Again, without the heel, that section is being used for the mouth and does not require being stuffed, so you can just leave that one aside until we get to the assembly stage. So here I am working back on the sock monkey. I'm almost done one of its legs. So that begs the question, what do we do when we finish? If you run out of string or when you're looking to finish the stitch because you've sewn all that you need, it's time to tie it off. So let's get a closer look at that. So the first thing you need to do to tie it off is get your needle underneath the previous stitch, the stitch you just finished. After you have your needle under there, when you pull it through, it's going to make a loop. This loop, you're going to put your needle through, and as you pull it tight, that loop will tighten on that stitch, and that will be 1 knot. So you need to do this about 2 or 3 times before it's actually secure, and then after that, you can snip the extra string off. It's important that you also don't cut your string too close to the knot because it might come undone. You can see here that I have finished sewing along the lines that I drew before, creating my feet. So now I'm going to take my scissors and cut up that space in between the 2 lines that I've sewn to separate the legs from each other. The line that we're cutting here, separating the legs, it's going to end about 1 inch below where the heel of the sock is. And then there'll be a hole left there. That is to be expected. The next thing I'm doing is just trimming the excess material off of the ends of the feet, making sure that they are nice and rounded. We're going to be turning this inside out, and we want to make sure that it's not too bulky on the inside with the extra material. But if you cut too much of this away, then the material, as it's being pulled on and stretched, you might see some threads start to come loose, so just watch out for that. So here I am flipping the body and the legs of my sock monkey so that the right side is now out. So originally we sewed with the wrong side facing outwards, and as we're flipping this around, we're going to see that you can't see the stitches anymore and they're all on the inside. So when we're stuffing, we want to make sure that we are starting with the sections that are furthest away from the hole, and that's going to be our legs. They are also the smallest section. So stuffing these, we want to make sure that the stuffing is getting all the way to the ends of all of our limbs and making sure that it is nice and full and plushy. A pencil is really good, or a marker, in terms of pushing the stuffing all the way down to the end. If you can't get your fingers in there, using tools like a pen or a pencil would be very helpful. As I am making sure that our sock monkey is nice and plushy, why don't we head over and see what's up with our ears, our mouth, our tail, and our arms. So here you can see the pattern that is going to make our tail, the arms, the mouth, and the ears for our sock monkey. Once you get this traced out, you're going to sew on the lines again with that back stitch that we used before. The only exception being the lines around the heel of the sock. These ones just need to be cut out and not sewed, as they will be the mouth of our sock monkey. Sewing should be fun, so don't be afraid to take your time with it. Tie a knot, take a break, and come back to it later. That is completely okay. Here you can see I'm cutting out the pieces from my sock after my sewing is complete. So I sewed the lines that I drew from my template to make my tail, my ears, and my arms for the sock monkey. And then I also have the heel section, which I did not need to sew, but that section will act as the mouth, so it still needs to be cut out. After cutting all my sections out, now I'm going to turn them inside out so that the right side, the pretty side of my material, is facing outwards and the stitches are inside and not showing. Again, a pencil or a pen is super helpful in doing this. I'm starting off my tail first. As you can see, it's very long and it was a little tricky, but I got it. With your ears that you're going to turn inside out, if you put them against the side of the sock, like we see in the pattern, they're going to be closed at the bottom. So what you're going to need to do is cut a hole in them just on the bottom side where there are no stitches already. And once you have that hole cut, you can turn it inside out and you can stuff it through that hole as well. So the hole doesn't need to be big, but you want to make sure that your stuffing can go in through it. And then when you sew it up, it's going to be against the monkey's head so that you won't see it. So this is the last section of our sack monkey making assembly. It's time to connect all the parts that we sewed and that we cut before. So here you can see I'm just sewing up the section in between the monkey's legs that isn't closed and that we used to stuff the monkey's body and the monkey's legs. So let's head on into a close-up and I'll show you guys how to do this stitch. Here you can see the test piece of material that I'm using, and you can see the gap that I'm going to be sewing over. So after anchoring your string on the back side of the fabric, you're going to use your string to go under one side of the fabric, come back up through it, then cross over to the other side of the fabric that you're trying to attach, and do the same there. Go under and come back up. And you can see when the stitch is pulled tight, the thread is invisible. So this is a very good stitch for this job. You're going to be using this stitch to close the gap in between the monkey's legs, as well as attach the ears, the mouth section, and the arms to the body. And as we're finishing up sewing this gap here, let's go take a look at how to finish off this stitch. So the first thing you need to do, much like last time, is find your previous stitch. You're going to put your needle underneath that loop and pull it through until you have a nice sized ring that's pulling tighter as you pull your needle, and you're going to tip your needle backwards and pull it through that loop. So as you pull your needle tight, the loop's pulling tight and that's tightening on that previous stitch. You're going to do that 3 or 4 times, making sure it's nice and tight. Then after that, since you're sewing in the main stuff section now, you're going to want to drive your needle back into the base of where that knot you just tied is, and push that needle all the way through to another side of the stuffed section. Pull it tight, snip the thread, and then you will see as the stuffing comes back out that the thread will disappear inside. It's going to make sure that your thread has a nice long tail so it won't come undone, but it's also not in the way. It's tucked inside, it's safe, and it's not visible. Here I'm grabbing some stuffing and the heel section of my other sock that I just cut out, which will now make the mouth. So I'm positioning it on the sock monkey where I want it to be, trying to find out where I think it looks best. And then after that, I'm going to use the same stitch that we used to close the gap between the monkey's legs to attach this to the face. Surprise! I ran out of stuffing, but that's okay. This is an obstacle, but it is not the end. So, as we always do when we run into problems, it's time to get creative. I'm taking these cotton balls, pulling them apart, making them a little bit fluffier, and I'm going to use them in the ears as well as parts of the arms so that it fills up a section. It still looks fluffy. It's going to be a little bit more rigid, but it will still have a plush kind of cushiony feel to it. So I think this will work well, and I'm excited to keep going. You can see here that I'm just stuffing the ears and then I'm positioning them where I think they should go on the head. It's not taking much cotton, and you guys should have some in your boxes from your star jars. So there you go. If you run out, you have some backup. After figuring out where you want your ears to be, it's time to sew. So we're going to be using that same stitch that we used before to close the gap between the monkey's legs. And we're just going to start probably near the top, anchor them down, and then as you sew around them, they will be more secure. Making sure that you hold in one spot is important. Yeah, you guys got this. So with our ears secured, we're going to move on to our arms. I've already stuffed one here, and I'm going to show you how to do the other one. I'm doing this with a mix of stuffing and cotton. So I'm taking the majority of the stuffing and I'm putting that in the bottom, the hand section, so the hand's a little bit softer. So I've only set aside about 1 pinch, and that 1 pinch of stuffing is going to end the arm off when we finish it. So we started off with stuffing, then we'll go to cotton balls for the middle section and a little bit of stuffing at the end to make sure that our shoulder is a little more flexible. To get this stuffing right where you want it, it's really useful to use a marker, a pencil, or a pen to stuff it in. Another tip, if your stuffing starts to look lumpy, you can rub it your hands almost like Play-Doh, and that will smooth it out a lot. Now that both of my arms are stuffed, I'm positioning them where I want them on the monkey's body, and then using that same stitch that we used for the ears and the hole that we stuffed the body with to secure these. Onto our very last body part now, it's our tail. So you can stuff this if you want. I decided I liked it to be a little bit more flexible, so I wanted to leave it non-stuffed. So what I did instead is I rolled down the top almost to cuff it, and then I folded it in half so that I could anchor it on and it would be a little bit smaller, which would give it a bit of a flare when it comes out away from the body. So after running my needle through the tail a couple times to make sure it was securely fastened to the thread, I then went through the body and started using the stitch that we used for the mouth and the ears and the arms and the stuffing hole on the tail again. It's time to give our monkeys some eyes. So the first step in sewing on our button eyes is anchoring our thread in the sock. And we're going to want to do that right where we want our first button to be positioned. It doesn't matter what order, so just pick one, figure out where you want it, and then anchor your string there. I'm doing a couple of base stitches just in the area to make sure that my thread has a strong grip. Then I am poking my needle up through one of the buttonholes and bringing it right next to the sock so I can position it where I want it. Then holding it there, I'm going to weave my needle through the loops on the button, back down through the material of the sock, up through the button, and back down through the material of the sock. Do that a couple times, more than a couple, quite a few, until the button feels secure, and then you can tie it off and pull the string back into the stuffing so you don't have to see the tail of it. And you can see here after I'm done securing my button and the string is all tied off, I'm taking my needle and putting it back down into the root of where the knot is, pulling it out the far side of that stuffed section, and then pulling on the string before I cut it so that the tail is lost in the stuffed section. So then I decided I wanted my monkey to have a smile. For stitches, I'm just putting my needle underneath the surface, pushing it back up and pulling it through that way, connecting those lines in kind of a smile shape. As you can see here, I'm almost finished making my sock monkey smile. So we go into the last phase of making a sock monkey, and that is naming the sock monkey. So I want you guys to think of names, write them down if you want, and let me know at Morning Watch tomorrow what we should call this monkey. You can see that I'm all done here, so I hope you guys enjoyed this project. Hope you had fun, and don't forget to send us pictures of your creations. Have a great day!